A tentative plan to send a team of unarmed social workers to some emergency 911 calls in Cambridge could officially be rolled out as soon as next month.
Hey, remember 4 years ago during all of the riots and the ideas of reinventing the police and defunding the police and reimagining law enforcement, we had these people who were saying, hey, when there's a violent, dangerous situation, instead of sending police officers and experts in law enforcement, we should send social workers to the scene. Remember that? Yeah, that was crazy. Well, in Cambridge, Massachusetts, they actually meant it. And this week, they're actually implementing that policy. Take a look.
We're definitely a pioneer in this approach.
A tentative plan to send a team of unarmed social workers to some emergency 911 calls in Cambridge could officially be rolled out as soon as next month, says Liz Speakman, director of the city's new Community Assistance Response and Engagement.
Having an unarmed civilian with experience in mental health going to mental health calls is really the right response.
Speakman tells us that the 5 members of the CARE team have extensive backgrounds as social workers and first responders. Unlike some other alternative response programs recently deployed in other cities across the country, the CARE team will not be accompanied by police when they are sent to nonviolent mental health related calls.
If anything goes wrong, if there's any safety concerns, they can radio for assistance immediately and get backup right away.
It's an opportunity for us to help fix a system that's been broken for a really long time.
CARE team member Marie Matthew is eager to start responding to emergencies that are presently handled by police with guns.
I think this program is an opportunity for us to take care of the people that we are trained to take care of.
Robert, listen, I'm not against the idea of sending mental health professionals to a situation that where they could diffuse potentially violent developments, I suppose. But I always just sort of presumed that they would be accompanied by armed law enforcement professionals. I worry about this plan, frankly, and I don't know if this is a really good idea. What am I missing?
No, you're missing nothing, Larry. It's a terrible idea. The bottom line is you're putting healthcare workers or mental health workers into extraordinary danger. It's naive to the point of danger. And I think you'll find that several of them will get shot or killed. And that'll be a terrible thing. And they'll reverse and they'll say, well, we shouldn't have done this and we shouldn't have done that. And when the FBI goes to a hostage rescue environment where they're dealing with a mental health issue, they deploy the HRT, but they never deploy the HRT without the tactical team right there with them. And there is often a handoff between the two of them back and forth. Now, this is like sending a dog catcher to a fire instead of a firefighter. This is a terrible idea.
Yeah, and I still feel like I'm missing something in this, Elaine, because as you just heard at the end there, if in fact the situation gets dangerous or violent, then they'll call the police and the police will get there. Well, isn't that why the police were called in the first place?
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more with Robert. You can't predict whether or not it would escalate into a violent situation. And what I firmly believe is that you can't curb criminal behavior or people breaking crimes without consequences. You're not going to do that through counseling. And we're seeing crime hit Main Street in a big way. Our polling shows that small business owners, 30% of them said that criminal behavior and theft in their establishments is actually starting to cut into their earnings. When you think about that, that's a third of small business owners in the country are saying, hey, crime is impacting my earnings because I have to hire more security to protect my customers and my employees. And I have to replace all of the stolen goods that are coming out of my establishments. I mean, that's impactful. And we've got a slew of liberal DAs who are just not enforcing criminal behavior, and they're allowing criminals back out on the street with no consequences. And these criminals know it.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I'm glad that your polls bear that out, because I don't know, when I see these videos, these viral videos of people going in and just filling trash bags full of goods off the shelves and walking out the door with no repercussions, my first thought, Akash, is not, gee, we have a mental health problem here. You know, we should probably send some trained therapists to go help them. No, this is a crime problem, and we don't seem to be taking it seriously.
The people who are not taking it seriously, frankly, are far left progressives who run cities like this. I mean, there's no more luxury belief than to try to inflict things like this on other people and then go back to your gated community in the suburb. Ultimately, the people who are hurt most by policies like this are poor people, minorities, people who are already living in difficult circumstances, not only because they end up being subject to more crime and more danger, but as Elaine is alluding to, businesses start to close, right? We see this happen in San Francisco, where you have CVS's and Walgreens and grocery stores closing up because they don't want to be in these kinds of neighborhoods. That ends up hurting the same people who need help the most, who are the ones that these liberals claim that they care about. But ultimately, Larry, we have this beautiful system of federalism, of states' rights, of local governance. And they are, of course, the petri dish, right? They can experiment all they want. We've seen this already be an abject failure in San Francisco, in Portland, and in other cities. Let Cambridge, Massachusetts have at it. And of course, as Robert said, it's going to be an abject failure. This will not last very long. And it'll be another lesson learned for the American people about what common sense good government looks like. And it's not the far left nonsense they push in cities like this.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it is interesting when you mentioned those little petri dishes, San Francisco and Cambridge, Massachusetts, now in Portland. Those cities all have something in common, don't they, in terms of the elected officials and the leadership there? But gosh, one other aspect of this that I'd love you to comment on, and that is, our elected officials, regardless of their political affiliation and what their personal beliefs are, their paramount responsibility beyond just safety, which this affects, is also good stewardship of the tax dollars that are coming into their accounts. This doesn't seem like just a wise use of money. It's going to cost more, and I don't see how it fixes the problem that these cities like San Francisco or Portland are experiencing.
That is a pretty common sense view of government that is shared not just by conservatives, but I would say by most Americans. The group of people whom it is not shared with are progressives in government. And there's one major reason that actually hasn't been discussed yet, and that is the influence of public sector unions on local government. Right? Public sector unions can engage in the political process. They help elect these people, and then they're the ones that they're negotiating against. They see taxpayers as a bottomless pit, right? And the elected officials respond accordingly, and they shovel money back to the public sector unions, all in the process of advancing this far left ideological agenda. There simply is very little concern for the taxpayer, for public safety, for common sense, good government. And I think until voters in red jurisdictions and blue jurisdictions start to realize that ugly cycle of public sector unions and Democrat politicians and advancing an ideological agenda at everybody else's expense, that cycle is going to unfortunately continue.
Robert, sadly, your membership at AMAC, they are disproportionately affected by these crime problems, and it also keeps them from being able to integrate properly in society because they're scared. They're scared to go to the local drugstore if something happens. And there have been times when what is often thought of as a local political issue, something like law and order and crime and law enforcement, it becomes a national issue. It becomes sort of a lightning rod for even a presidential election. Are you sensing, based on where we are right now, that could be the case in 2024?
Well, no question. I mean, seniors do feel vulnerable. They've spent their entire lives investing in this system, building the system, creating the infrastructure for public safety. And I think what we really are witnessing here, and we think about it in big policy terms, but the nutshell version is that these liberals do not understand human nature. And this is a basic misunderstanding. And this is why these radical ideologies don't work. They are not in sync with how people really are and how they really think. This is essentially an appeasement at the national or international level brought down to the local level, and it always fails.
Yeah, and I think it's no mistake, not just that Cambridge is generally progressive, left-wing, Marxist in their politics, but it's also the home of some of our more elite homes of higher education. This sounds like a policy that was born in some classroom where a professor is explaining how things ought to be. And well, I fear that they're going to learn a lesson. I'm afraid it's going to be a deadly lesson.